Hello, my people. It's your Negro with Aptitude and host of the Blackboard, Mickey Lee. A few years ago, I posted a video explaining the history of Memorial Day and delving into the contributions that blacks have made to this country since before there was a country. And I thought this Memorial Day would be a great time to reload that video. I hope you enjoy it, and I hope it helps you learn some things that you may not have known, and I hope it helps you to understand just how good it is to be black. Happy Memorial Day to you and your family. If there are any service people that are watching this video or veterans, thank you for your service. For those of you just joining me for the first time, I'm Mickey Lee, your Negro with Aptitude and host of the Blackboard. Welcome everybody to another special homeroom edition. This is where we keep things short and sweet, focusing on the announcements of the day and logging your attendance to make sure you are where you're supposed to be. Depending on when you see this video, we are either celebrating or have just celebrated Memorial Day. Though in recent years it has evolved to a little more than backyard barbecues and another day off, Memorial Day actually is a time to reflect and pause upon the more than 1 million American citizens who have given their lives for the freedom of this country. And that counts all of the American citizens that have fallen in combat, in conflicts within the country and without. So it's been over 1 million. I think the last count is about 1.1 million. Memorial Day got its start in the years following the Civil War. Now, there's a lot of dispute about how Memorial Day got started, and there's actually over 24 towns and cities that claim to be the birthplace of the Memorial Day festivities. Some people feel that it began as women's brigades in the North began to decorate the graves of the Union soldiers. Some say no, it was the women in the South celebrating the Confederate soldiers, and others feel that it was other groups of folks that got together and decided to celebrate all of the soldiers and to decorate all of the graves. The official place where Memorial Day is supposedly began is Waterloo, New York, but again, that's a disputed fact. One thing is for sure is that our freedom hasn't been free, and that it has cost over 1.1 million American lives. Here at the Blackboard, I talk about things from a pro-black perspective, and this topic is no different. One of the little known facts about Memorial Day's possible beginnings is that on May 1st of 1865, newly freed slaves in Charleston, South Carolina, decorated the graves of 257 Union Army members who had been killed and dumped in a mass grave in a Confederate prisoner of war camp. So many actually feel the very first memorial, though it was held on May 1st and was thought of more along May Day, the very first memorial may have been those former slaves that buried 257 Union men in their own individual graves as a celebration marking a memorial and a thanksgiving for those fallen lives which helped to secure their freedom. Now, that's actually the topic that I want to discuss in this short and sweet homeroom. You see, when people talk about the Civil War, generally what comes out of it is two narratives. The hundreds of thousands of lives that were lost, primarily white lives, and the fact that Lincoln freed the slaves. By now, we should know that that is a false narrative. In fact, both are false narratives. But unfortunately, that is one narrative that keeps creeping up, especially now when you hear from the Republicans saying, hey guys, look black folks, we're not so bad. Don't you remember? Lincoln freed the slaves. Well, that is untrue. Because first of all, what Lincoln signed was an Emancipation Proclamation whose jurisdiction was very limited. It really had no authority in the southern states. Secondly, and most importantly, nearly 200,000 black soldiers fought in the Civil War. This idea that black folks have just kind of sat by while the white gladiator and white warrior went out and fought for this country to make it happen and make it free, the land of the free for everyone else. Of course, this simply isn't true. As far back as the American Revolution, the very first person who died in the Boston Massacre, which was the event that lit the fuse for the American Revolution, was Crispus Attucks. Crispus Attucks was a mixed-race individual of African and Native heritage, Native American heritage to the earliest records. And alongside him were others who also died, and about 9,000 free and freedmen and slaves fought on the side of the Patriots. The total combined number of blacks who fought in the American Revolution on both sides was roughly about 10 to 12,000. Historians guesstimate about 10 to 15% of the entire force. Now, some did fight on the side of the Loyalists. Those were the folks that were loyal to King George. But the vast majority fought on the side of the Patriots. Those are, of course, the ones who won American independence. The slaves were promised manumission. Some of them were promised land. Some of them were supposed to be provided for by their former slave owners, etc. In most cases, these things didn't happen. And so you had people who had fought in the American Revolution winding up having to return to slavery because the promises had not been kept, even though they were in writing. So all throughout America's existence, and even before its existence, black people have fought in armed conflict, both within this country and without. And I want to take a special moment here to note that not only did black men fight for America when they themselves were not free, black women fought as well. As early as the American Revolution and in the Civil War, black women were nurses, scouts, and spies. One of the most famous, of course, during the Civil War was Harriet Tubman. There has been no conflict, both on the American grounds or overseas, that black soldiers, both men and women, haven't died and fought for this country. So when we talk about Memorial Day, really our memories as black people need to take a new frame. First of all, we need to be aware, and we need to share with our children, that we have never just sat idly by while the white gladiator fought for freedom, the land of the free and the home of the brave. We have always been right there beside them, and our numbers would have been increased if it wasn't for those white people, legislators, and the white creators of this country passing laws to stop us from volunteering and to stop us from fighting in the conflict. Now, I personally think that's great. I don't think that we should have given up our lives for a country that didn't want us and still doesn't want us. But it does show the great strength of character, the great strength of faith, and the great strength of unity, desiring of unity, that led these black men and women to put their lives on the line for this nation. So when I think about Memorial Day, I want us to remember three key things. Number one, this country would not exist without us. Many times we focus on the slave labor, and of course that is tantamount importance because, as I've said in other videos, many historians say that the only thing possibly greater than the value of the labor extracted from the slaves for free is possibly the land itself. But of course no one knows how valuable land is until you do something with it. What they are clear on, though, is that all of the immigrants in all of the industries combined, and all of the labor of those immigrants combined through the turn of the last century, into the 1900s, did not equal the labor extracted from all of the slaves. So number one, this country would not exist without us, and while the slave labor is one issue, other issues about our contributions include military aid, which from the American Revolution, if you talk about the Battle at Bunker Hill, if you talk about Concord, if you talk about Lexington, if you talk about any of the major battles, black men were there. If you talk about Civil War, there were several regiments of distinguishment that were all black regiments. If you talk about the War of 1812, if you talk about the Mexican-American War, if you talk about the Korean War, and so forth, every single war we have served with honor and distinction. And so aside from slavery, aside from military involvement and contributions, there are our scientific, our artistic, our medical, our financial, our business, and our religious contributions that led us to be the leaders of uniting this country, so that every citizen has the ability to live in a house where they can afford, send their children to a school with other people that may or may not look like them, but just other Americans. An American has the right to compete for a job based on their skills versus being excluded because of their skin color. They have the right to gain medical attention, again, based on their need medically, instead of being excluded based on their skin color. They have the right to walk down the street without worrying about whether they will have to step off the sidewalk because a white person is approaching. The list goes on, and those are our contributions. So the first thing to remember on Memorial Day from now on is that this country would not exist without us, without our forefathers, without our foremothers, without the strength of character that they passed down to us, not for one generation, not for two generations, but for every single generation for the nearly 500 years that we have been in this land. That's astounding. The second thing that I want you to remember on Memorial Day is that nobody has given us anything. As James Brown has said, I don't want nobody to give me nothing. Open up the door, I'll get it myself. Well, guess what? We are the only group who has gotten it ourselves. Now, I know in recent years, this has all been, you're either going to see the Hollywood images of the white gladiator, or now it's going to be immigrationized, where everything was a contribution and creation of an immigrant. Okay, that's just designed to whitewash our history and whitewash our contributions and make white people feel better about themselves, because they really do think of us as dark-skinned white people. And what does that mean for them to think of us as dark-skinned white people? Well, it means that they think we would do to them what they would do to them if they had done to them what they did to us. Think about that. But of course, we're not dark-skinned white people. We are black people. And we're not Africans anymore. We're black people. Entirely different value system, entirely different thought process, entirely different experience with this reality. Okay? The third thing I want you to remember is, despite all of our sacrifices, despite everything that we have given up for this nation, the story will be whitewashed, or the story will be immigrant-nationized. That's what I call it. Immigrant-nized, okay? Everything will be contributed to the immigrants. So what that means for us as Black folks is that we need to stop looking at these people to value us. We need to stop looking at these people to ever appreciate our contributions. And we need to lift our sights much higher to the person who made us, to the person who does remember our sacrifices, to the person to whom all of our shed blood means something. And that person is Jesus Christ. Now, we are not worshiping Jesus because he is depicted in some pictures as having blonde-haired and blue-eyed. Well, you're just falling to a trick of Satan, who is keeping you in the mindset about what our unfortunate white brothers have pushed, an image that our unfortunate white brothers have pushed, rather than picking up your Bible and finding about Jesus himself for yourself. When I pray to the Lord God Almighty and to Jesus, and I thank him for the gift of his son Jesus, and I call on Jesus' name, I don't have an image of anybody in mind. It's a spirit, and it's a force that is to guide me safely from this fleshly life, from this earthly life, to one in which my spirit will reside forever. So we need to stop looking to these folks to validate us, and we need to look higher and return our sights to the God who made us, to whom all of our sacrifices matter, to whom all of our shed blood matters, to whom we should be devoting our memories and learning about him and finding out about him while we have time. So what should Memorial Day mean to Black folks? It should mean a time of remembrance of what a great people we are and what a great God who made us. Remember your dignity, Black people, and stay Black anyway.
Seeing and hearing, please subscribe, then hit the bell so that you will be notified of each new lesson. My plan is to increase the frequency quite a bit. If you love us, Black people, please share these videos as well. Our people are spending too much time on the Kardashians, basketball, baseball, Hollywood, ex-wives, lovers, all of that crap. Too much time on FaceTime, Facebook, tweeting, twerking, and trying to conform to this twisted world when we were never meant to be permanent here. Tell them to spend some time with me in class, being educated and empowered for eternity.